Okay, good afternoon, everyone. First off, Happy New Year, Happy Lunar New Year's Day. I'm very grateful for you to join us for the program today. My name is Yeonsu Ji. I am Associate Curator of Korean Art. I'm here to introduce our wonderful speaker, Seung Hee Oh, today. So Seung Hee is she's our new addition to the Arts of Asia. She just arrived at the Art Institute of Chicago last July, so this is her first lecture, and I'm very grateful that she prepared this wonderful thing for us. And so I'll just introduce her. So she is, prior to joining the Art Institute of Chicago in 2023, Seung Hee worked for East Asian art collections at the Harvard Art Museums, Smithsonian's National Museum of Asian Art, Villa Atati, the Seoul National University of Museum, and then she just received her PhD from the Harvard University. She finished her dissertation and defending her dissertation last April, and then we were very lucky to have her as our team. So she will talk about this very interesting theme, Empress Dowager's patronage of the Buddhist arts. And I think after the talk, you will all should go to our Chinese gallery to look at the works that she's talking about today. So without further ado, please welcome Seung Hee Oh.
Okay, thank you, Yeonsu, for your kind introduction. And thanks everyone for coming to this lecture on the Lunar New Year's Day, the first day of the Year of the Dragon. As a dragon, because I was born several dragon years ago, don't ask me how many dragon years ago, yes. I'm really pleased to start the new year with my very first lecture at the Art Institute. The work I introduced today happens to be a little bit related to the Lunar New Year's Day, so I'm really grateful for my colleagues who arranged this talk on this auspicious day. So when I first arrived at the Art Institute last summer and began to study the collection, there was one object that caught my attention almost immediately. It is a carefully folded sutra, or Buddhist scripture, with the cover wrapped in fine yellow silk. The title slip reads, Illustrated Edition of King Gao's Avalokitesvara Sutra, preached by the Buddha. And the credit line shows that it entered our collection in 2013 as a gift from Dorothy Broad Edinburgh, a longtime patron who gifted nearly 1,000 works of art to the Art Institute. The quality of the very fine silk on the cover and the inscription framed by a tablet decorated with 5 clawed dragons follow the conventions of Buddhist scriptures published by the imperial court during China's Ming dynasty. After flipping about 60 pages, I found this inscription at the very end of the sutra. It reads, On the auspicious day in the first month of the year 1590 under the Guanyin Emperor's reign, Empress Dowager Cisheng of the Great Ming dynasty grants this sutra from the depth of her heart. In other words, it was not the emperor, but the mother of the emperor who ordered to print this sutra. Furthermore, this King Gao's Avalokitesvara Sutra is an apocryphal script, which first written in Chinese with no Sanskrit original. But Empress Dowager Cisheng used the best craftsmanship in the empire to engrave and print this apocryphal sutra with rich illustrations not found in any other printed versions of this text. Then some questions may arise here. What was the role of the emperor's mother in the Buddhist enterprise around the imperial court? Why did she commission this apocryphal script with unusually elaborate illustrations? We can seek answers by taking a closer look at the details of King Gao's Avalokitesvara Sutra, now on view in Gallery 134, in the Chinese Art Gallery. So let's start from looking at what is written and illustrated in the sutra. It consists of 62 pages made out of 11 sheets of paper and is folded and unfolded like a long extended accordion. Upon opening, we see the magnificent scene of Shakyamuni Buddha's preaching, surrounded by his disciples, guardians, celestial beings, and prayers. After frontispiece is an inscription praying for the emperor's longevity and perpetual propagation of Buddhist teachings. Then we see, okay. Then we see an image of Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara seated on a rocky cliff by the sea. And her young disciple Sudana, in the gesture of worship, stands on the left-hand side, while a guardian king floats in the sky. The composition is typical of Ming dynasty sutras associated with Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara. On the back side of the paper, each deity is marked by the Tibetan transliteration of Sanskrit mantra, Om Ma Hum. Then there is the main text of the sutra, which is unusually short. It is less than 700 characters long. So later we will see why the text had to be short. To better understand the value of our King Gao's Avalokitesvara Sutra, let's first identify the two figures referred to in the title, King Gao and Avalokitesvara. Avalokitesvara is one of the bodhisattvas, referring to enlightened beings who have chosen to remain on earth as accessible examples of Buddhist believers to follow. The Lotus Sutra is generally considered to be the earliest literature that introduces the teachings of Avalokitesvara. So on the left bottom corner of this frontispiece illustration for the Lotus Sutra, we can find Avalokitesvara sitting on the rocky cliff surrounded by prayers, possibly in some trouble like the storm, fire, and even like in prison, like with the Tang, and then we see the storm, shipwreck, and so forth. So the 25th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, titled The Universal Gateway, is devoted to Avalokitesvara, describing the deity as a compassionate bodhisattva who hears the cries of sentient beings and works tirelessly to help those who call the deity's name. Saving people from extreme suffering such as fire, shipwreck, as we saw briefly in the previous image, robbery, and some violence, like this person here getting beaten up by some people, disease, childlessness, and unjust imprisonment was the deity's most important role. So when translated into Chinese, Guanyin, the name literally means the observer of sound. So for the rest of today's talk, I will use Guanyin as an interchangeable name for Avalokitesvara, since the talk focuses on China. Also, I refer to King Gao's Avalokitesvara Sutra in a shortened title, King Gao's Sutra. So Guanyin was originally described as a male or gender-neutral being. I believe many of you recognize this seated Guanyin on the left-hand side, currently on view in Gallery 101, just right outside of this hall. But when we look at the face very closely, we can find a trace of mustache here and some beer here, painted when the sculpture was initially made in the 11th or 12th century. But later in China, as we can see from this gilt bronze work from the late 14th or 15th century, Guanyin in a female form gradually gained bigger popularity. One reason for this gender fluidity is the Bodhisattva's ability to manifest in many different forms. Buddhist beliefs and practices involving Guanyin also took many forms, as the deity was widely localized in China. Now we need to find out who King Gao is. As I mentioned at the beginning, King Gao's Sutra is an apocryphal script which is only indigenous to China. And King Gao is in fact related to the origin of this sutra. So King Gao's sutra often contains a postscript to explain the origin, and the Art Institute's version, to my knowledge, is the only one to include extensive illustrations to narrate the origin story. The illustrated postscript occupies more than half of the sutra, so 38 of the total 62 pages. So it really helps us visualize the narrative. So according to this story and the illustration, an official named Sun Jingde was imprisoned after involuntarily committing a crime. Awaiting death in prison, Sun Jingde prayed to Guanyin by reciting the Lotus Sutra. One night he dreamed of a monk, and the monk warned that Sun Jingde cannot escape the death sentence by reciting the Lotus Sutra. Instead, the monk advised him to recite a particular sutra 1,000 times. So Sun Jingde asked the monk how he can obtain this particular sutra while he's in prison. So the monk offered him to teach orally, so Sun Jingde memorized it in his dream and recited 900 times. So now we may assume why the sutra needed to be so succinct. If it were the Lotus Sutra with nearly 70,000 characters, there's no way he could recite anywhere near this number overnight. And the Universal Gateway chapter, that one particular chapter about Guanyin alone, is over 2,000 characters. Then the time came for the execution to be conducted at the market. So Sun Jingde asked the prison official how far away the market was, and the official asked why he wanted to know. So Sun Jingde told the official about his dream and begged him to slow down so that he could finish the remaining 100 times of recitation. Eventually, Sun Jingde managed to finish the recitation by the time they arrived at the market. As the executioner plunged the sword into Sun's neck, the blade broke into 3 pieces, leaving it unharmed. So the illustration even includes exactly the 3 pieces of blade that are kind of breaking into, at the moment it got plunged onto Sun's neck. So this miracle moved King Gao, and the king ordered the prisoners to recite this sutra written down by the prison guard. And King Gao tried the sword on these prisoners who recited the sutra 1,000 times, but they all survived. And again, we see the 3 pieces of blade floating in the sky. So the King Gao decreed that everyone in his kingdom should recite this sutra to receive the blessing. And the sutra became to be known as King Gao's Avalokitesvara Sutra. There's another Tibetan translation of the Sanskrit mantra, Raksha, meaning to protect, to mark the end of the story and then also to protect the sutra. So here, King Gao was Gao Huan, actual historical figure, who was the powerful prime minister of the Eastern Wei dynasty and later honored as the titular founder of the Northern Qi dynasty. Although Gao Huan died 3 years before his son established the Northern Qi dynasty, King Gao's Sutra spread from the present-day Hebei province soon after the new dynasty was formed in 550. It was the period of division in Chinese history when different dynasties were established and dissolved every few decades. So a strong ruler was needed in such a chaotic time. In the 6th century, Chinese imperial authority integrated the concept of worldly saviors into the legitimation of emperorship. The idea of worldly saviors originated from the Indic concept of Chakravartin, which refers to an ideal universal king who rules ethically over the world. Because Chakravartin literally means the wheel-turning king, we see a figure here turning this wheel on this early sculpture from India. Worldly saviors were also believed to alleviate the chaos caused especially by apocalyptic disasters. If this sounds similar to the role of Guanyin or Avalokitesvara to you, you are very spot on. In fact, one of the 33 different manifestations of Guanyin or Avalokitesvara in the Lotus Sutra is a king. We know that King Gao's story describes how the king became a benevolent savior of all prisoners and powerful promoter of the Guanyin's teaching. Such a characterization could legitimize the rulership of the newly established Northern Qi emperors, who are the descendants of the benevolent King Gao. After 1,000 years later, in 1590, Empress Dowager Cisheng sponsored the printing of King Gao's Sutra. But she was not an emperor. She was a woman confined to the inner court. So can we still assume her political patronage of Buddhism behind the production of this sutra? A short answer is almost yes, but the longer version of the answer is a bit complicated because her son was the emperor. She was even not formally an empress at the beginning. Cisheng was born to a commoner family in a suburb of Beijing. Her father was a mason, while nothing is known about her mother. Despite her background, Cisheng received a good education and was taken to the court of the crown prince and future Longjing emperor. Cisheng was only a court lady, but happened to give birth to the emperor's 3 children. Her life underwent a big change as the Longjing emperor's reign lasted only 5 years. The emperor's first empress had no child, and the emperor had sons from his second wife and Cisheng, but 2 of the older ones died in early childhood. So the third but the eldest surviving son between the Longjing emperor and Cisheng ascended the throne as Wanli emperor. This allowed his mother to become Empress Dowager. The Wanli emperor reigned for 48 years, from 1572 to 1620, the longest reign of any emperor in the Ming dynasty. In nearly half a century, the dynasty experienced many ups and downs, and this particular period also marks the so-called late Ming period, the historical period known for the renewal of Buddhism, to which the Empress Dowager and the emperor both contributed greatly. His reign was unusually long, not because he lived long, but because he ascended the throne at the strangely young age of 9. Imagine our 3rd grader rules the entire country. Yeah. So because he became the emperor at the age of 9, during the first 10 years, the grand secretary, the imperial eunuch, and his mother rose to prominence by assisting the young emperor in state affairs. Despite the great privilege of being the young emperor's mother, Cisheng did not abuse her political power. Instead, she lavished her patronage on Buddhism. One of her most ambitious projects was building and restoring nearly 50 temples throughout the country, 50 temples. Also, often together with her son Wanli Emperor, Cisheng widely circulated the Buddhist canon. The set of the Buddhist canon they distributed is what is known as the Yongle Northern Canon, which was initiated by the Yongle Emperor in the early 15th century. This set of canon contains around 1,600 works of scripture in over 6,000 fascicles, with additional works Cisheng added later. So they were distributed as they are. We can see on the photo in many boxes. And during the reign of the Wanli Emperor, more than 100 places received this massive set of canon, and it was Empress Dowager Cisheng who orchestrated its production and distribution. In the imperial decree given with the canons, the Wanli Emperor repeatedly used the term Saint Mother and underscored the Empress Dowager's crucial role in the distribution. His repeated use of Saint Mother not only elevated the Empress Dowager to a divine status, but also defined himself as a filial son. But our King Gao's Sutra was never catalogued as part of the Yongle Northern Canon. The absence of the emperor's decree and his seal implies that Empress Dowager alone oversaw the production of this sutra. In fact, Cisheng printed and distributed more than 20 copies of sutras at her own expense in 1589 as well, so 1 year before our King Gao's Sutra was published. So then what was happening between the same mother and her filial son around this time? So in 1586, so 4 years before our King Gao's Sutra was made, the issue of succession arose when the emperor elevated his favorite concubine, Lady Zhang, here, to the rank of imperial noble consort, placing her only one rank below all of his wives, including Lady Wang, who was the mother of the emperor's eldest son. So moreover, the emperor favored the son of Lady Zhang over the eldest son as his successor. Officials urged him to comply with proper ritual order and the principle of primogeniture to appoint his eldest son. Empress Dowager sided with officials on the matter, with personal sympathy for the mother of the emperor's eldest son, as the two women shared a similar background. So this is truly something more complicated than the succession and the crown combined, if you're familiar with those TV shows. Yeah, a lot of drama was happening in the court. So anyway, this succession dispute lasted more than 20 years and impacted national affairs so significantly that it was called the foundation of the state crisis. As the dispute continued, the Wanli Emperor withdrew himself from the daily meetings with the officials, leaving his throne physically empty. So this was the time when Empress Dowager Cisheng began to associate herself with Guanyin, perhaps as a subtle way to maintain her influence over the government. It all began with a miraculous event. So in the summer of 1586, only a few months after the succession dispute began, Rare double-flowered lotuses bloomed at Cisheng's residence. So to commemorate this event, the Guanyin emperor commissioned an artist to depict the flowers and officials to compose celebratory poems. Today, we can see the earliest pictorial record of this auspicious omen in a stone carving on steles in Beijing. This stele stands next to the 13-story pagoda of Zhuzhou Monastery, which was built under the patronage of the Empress Dowager Cisheng. The ink rubbing from this stele shows the picture a little more clearer because, well, on the stone it's really difficult to tell what's going on. So this is the ink rubbing currently in the National Library of China. So the imperial eulogy inscribed on this stele reads, "My saint mother's benevolence and mercy reached heaven. Heaven was moved and so produced an auspicious omen. Auspicious lotus flowers grew in the palace. Thus I grant the painting of a bodhisattva image to transmit this event, prolong the dynasty, bless the people, and make heaven and earth alike sacred." And this stele depicts an elegantly dressed female figure leaning against a balustrade in a garden setting, looking out over a pond of blooming lotus. While the inscription talks about the Empress Dowager, the figure is recognizable as Guanyin. The well-known attributes of the deity, including her bejeweled body, the image of the Buddha Amitabha on her crown, a vase with a willow branch, the parrot, and the young boy Sudana clearly identified the figure as Guanyin. A companion stele on the other side of the pagoda presents the so-called fish basket Guanyin, which is one of the most popular manifestations of Avalokitesvara in China. So we can see this basket with a fish in it, and Guanyin is holding this basket. So that's why it is known as fish basket Guanyin. But this image is distinguished by the huge lotus flowers lining behind her. So they echo the lotuses on the opposite stele, we just saw, and thereby conflating the image of Guanyin and the Empress Dowager. Moreover, the emperor's emphasis on his mother's benevolence reinforces the association of his same mother with the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokitesvara. But the succession issue continued in the court. In 1589, the emperor agreed to appoint the eldest son as his successor, although it did not mean that he actually appointed his heir apparent. It was a false promise. However, this decision was opposed by Lady Tang and her faction and caused a wave of controversy that continued another decade. So Cisheng's inscription on our King Gao's Sutra tells that it was printed in the first month, so this is a lunar month, first lunar month of 1590. So I tracked down to see what happened in the first month of 1590 in the court. So according to the veritable records of the Ming dynasty, on the Lunar New Year's Day, the Guanyin emperor gathered ministers and expressed concerns about his health and some issues that disturbed him. One critical case was from the writing by one official who criticized the emperor's overindulgence in alcohol and favor for Lady Tang. And this official even accused the emperor of bribery. So enraged, Guanyin emperor said that he considered a severe punishment for this commentator. So ministers at the gathering strongly dissuaded the emperor, saying that the emperor's virtue lies in tolerance and generosity. The forgiving virtue of a ruler resonates with the benevolence practiced by King Gao after learning the salvational power of Guanyin. On behalf of the absent emperor during the ongoing succession dispute, his sane mother wrote down her wish for the emperor's generosity and longevity in King Gao's Sutra. In fact, Cisheng once attempted to pardon the prisoners by herself. On one occasion in the early years when she was more influential in state affairs, Cisheng requested the Grand Secretary to cancel capital punishment out of her belief in Buddhist non-killing. But she immediately withdrew her request when the Grand Secretary declined it due to legal issues. Cisheng's self-restraint in intervening state affairs strikingly differs from the first imperial woman who associated herself with Buddhist deities. The Tang dynasty female emperor Wu Zetian famously appropriated the image of the future Buddha Maitreya and the cosmic Buddha Vairochana, among many other Buddhist figures, as we can see from this huge Vairochana image in the Longmen grottos in China. However, ruling the empire directly was not realistic for Ming empresses, who are fundamentally forbidden to participate in government by the law. Nevertheless, Empress Dowager Cisheng was able to successfully build her image as same mother of the emperor by carefully avoiding the abuse of power as she moved between the political and religious spheres. Cisheng continued to commission the images of Guanyin to be spread throughout the country as stone carvings, paintings, and prints. And one of the notable examples is currently in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Probably painted after the Zhuzhou Monastery stele, this painting presents Guanyin surrounded by glamorous lotus blossoms in a garden. The spread of the Empress Dowager's images of Guanyin increased her visibility and her status in both secular and religious worlds, while the court was undergoing the decades-long succession dispute. In the 17th century, even the cult of the Nine Lotus Bodhisattva arose, whose followers believed that this Bodhisattva was a reincarnation of the Empress Dowager Cisheng. As we can see from this example of Empress Dowager Cisheng, the promotion and creation of Buddhist images and texts is not limited to a matter of personal faith, but speaks to familial and even national concerns. The artworks now displayed in Gallery 134 represent various aspects of Buddhist practice in China, reflecting the devotees' search for different levels of salvation. So including King Gao's Avalokitesvara Sutra, some of the objects on view in this rotation, they are on view for the first time since they entered the collection. So I hope you have time to check out our new rotation in the Chinese Art Gallery if you haven't done so. Thanks so much for listening to my talk, and I really look forward to hearing questions. So we do have time for questions, so please raise your hand so the staff will bring a microphone to you. Or we can skip the question too. No questions? Do I see any hands? I don't know. Oh, yeah. I think, yeah. Sorry, the light is, yeah.
Hello. So thank you for your talk. So you said that there were many of these kind of sutras or pamphlets distributed. Is there only one remaining, or do different museums have like same ones in their collections?
Oh, that's a great question. So, at least during this particular dynasty called Ming Dynasty, there were numerous occasions of distributing the sutras throughout the country. So, like over several hundred times actually. So and sometimes they stayed in the one place. Sometimes they were redistributed as some kind of gift and offerings. So at this point, like now, they are everywhere. Some of those that stayed in the same temple that received many years ago, well, they are in those temples, or some of them are in some like municipal museums, and another set is surprisingly University of Chicago Library has like a big set of this too. So they are basically everywhere in the world. So thank you for your question. Do we see any other hand? Yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I see. Yeah.
Thank you. How are they printed?
Yeah.
Is it a woodcut or a hand drawing or what?
Yes. Thanks for your question. That it is actually very important. It's woodblock print. So the carvers carve the block of wood, and then print, like apply ink and print. But when we look at this, well, let me see. Maybe, yeah. I think we can just look at. So when we think of the block of wood, and then in order to make the ink on the wood block transferred onto the paper surface, that part needs to be like relieved, right? So negative part, the white part, means they're all carved out. And then the black part means they are left and relieved. So it's actually a lot of work, so much labor, so much manual work, so much human effort invested in this carving and printing of the sutra. So when you look at this in person, you can imagine the process of making actually. So again, the black part, the inked part is the relief, but all the negative white part is actually carved out. So they are all like really just so much work invested in there. Thank you so much for your question.
Given, it's working? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Given the vast number of illustrations, is it known if a team of artists created the block prints, or was there a master in charge of all of the artwork?
Yeah, that's a great question. Although we don't have records of everything, but it is a kind of convention to have like a monk who oversees the entire project, and then like a huge group of artisans in the workshop work together to carve and print. So it's a collaborative work. But sometimes like head editor's name is clarified in the record, but for this one, we don't have any name. Thanks for your question.
Thank you for your talk. With all these illustrations, I was also curious about the intended audience for these pamphlets. Were they supposed to be on display, like we're seeing in the museum, so lay people could also learn the meaning of these sutras? I'm just wondering how much we know about the intended audience.
That's a really, really great question. So it is not intended for displaying like this, at least, yeah. But it needs to be used at some point. It was made to be used for ritual. That's why it can be folded and unfolded. But it shouldn't be used too much because it's so fragile, especially the sutra that are bound in this manner, like a accordion, they're very vulnerable. So actually, when the court was distributing these sutras, they also informed the recipients that you shouldn't use it too much. So they kind of warned because they're so fragile. But yeah, they could be used for certain rituals, or those who haven't memorized the sutras, they still needed to read and recite until they memorize everything. So yeah, they were intended for actual using, but not for everyday use. Yes. Oh, I see so many hands. Yes.
Hi. As a follow-up to that, who would have been able to read it? So who was the exact audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, usually monks, priests in the temples, they can, of course, they're literate. And many lay believers were like upper class women, and then there's some like scholars also followed Buddhism like intellectually as well. So many literate people could read them, including of course monks. But by reciting them, those who couldn't really read the characters, they could follow. They could, like this Sun Jingde in the story. He learned the sutra orally. So, yeah, those who couldn't read, they could listen to what the monks recite and then learn the sutra. Yes, I see so many hands. Yes, yeah, I think they will come to that. Yeah.
I'm curious about the history. Were there many young emperors
Yes.
like this? And was mom always involved?
Well, yeah, there are some cases. There are some cases, either mothers or eunuchs, because eunuch was basically like a butler, like a head butlers in the high society. So yeah, they kind of oversaw the state affairs. So it was not uncommon. And actually, after that long, succession dispute, the eldest son actually became the emperor after Wanli emperor, and he was still pretty young. But the fate of that young emperor was not good because he probably got poisoned. Because he didn't live. He died after like 3 weeks. He became the emperor, although he was young and healthy. The fate of the young emperors are all different. But Wanli was lucky enough to have very charismatic mother and grand secretary. But yeah, it's sometimes mother, sometimes eunuchs as a householder. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the wonderful talk. I just have a question related to the usage that was brought up earlier. You mentioned, if I remember correctly, that the back of this text also have the sutra also have some text on it.
Oh
yeah. Could you talk a little bit more about like what that text is and what would that have been? How would that have been like related to the usage? Like, would that serve any function?
You mean the box, like on the yellow box, right? I think it might take a while to go back there.
Yeah, just like on the back of the paper, sutra.
Back of the sutra?
Yeah, or is it empty for this one?
Oh, the Tibetan script. Oh, yeah, okay, that's pretty at the beginning. When we flipped, with the back side of the paper, there is Tibetan script written on the every single Buddhist deity illustrated on the sutra. So what is written there is Om Hum, which means like mind mudra and mantra, like a saying, speaking. So it's basically for protection. There are many functions of those mantras, like basically spells. The primary purpose is a protection of the sutra. Again, it's very vulnerable and it's very sacred text, so they wanted to protect. And by inscribing those mantras behind each deity, these makers, these priests, they officially consecrate this sutra, and each deity, depicted deity, actually they were meant to be the actual deities, although they are just printed pictures. But by having those inscriptions behind them, they get to have this kind of religious authority. So there are many functions of those mantras, and during this time, sutra makers used Tibetan to write down those mantras. Basically long story short, two primary functions: one for protection of the sutra, second to consecrate the deities. Yes? Oh, sorry. Okay, well, thanks for your question. Not all of them are survived, and for this, our King Gao's Sutra, I haven't found any wood block, but from this particular period, from Ming Dynasty, there are some blocks survived in Nanjing, and also some in Beijing, but not all of them survived because, again, they are so vulnerable to fire and other types of damage, so it's very rare to retrieve the wood block. Yeah, thanks for your question.
I think we have time for one more question.
No? Okay.
Thank you so much. I have a question. I think at the very beginning you were mentioning that this particular sutra is more illustrated and more elaborate than ones you've seen. So could you speak a little bit more to how they're typically represented, or what was striking, or if you know why this one was so elaborate? Yeah, thank you so much for your question. I think I was waiting for that question because I prepared, but I need to go back so far. Let me move a little bit because I actually prepared some other examples. So there are many illustrated sutras, but not for this particular King Gao's Sutra. As far as I know, many of the surviving editions of this particular King Gao's Sutra only has frontispiece illustrations or just no image at all, just the text alone. And the examples that I found, oh my God, now I'm regretting about going back. So getting there. Yeah. Almost there. Oh yeah, almost there. Thanks for your patience. So this case only has frontispiece illustration, but it has some kind of narrative aspect. We see like prisoners, it is Sun Jingdao, the moment of execution, and praying to the officials and so forth. And this was published also from the Ming Dynasty, but it's a little earlier than our King Gao's Sutra, and it was not written in Chinese language. Some of you may notice, but it's in Tang language. Anyway, and this is the only illustration on this version. And another version I found from Chinese University of Hong Kong, it has the frontispiece illustration similar to what we have here, but that's all. This is ours. So this is the only illustrations, and then there's no extensive illustrations to explain the origin story of this particular sutra. So far, our institute version is the only one I know. Thank you so much for your question. Okay. Thank you so much.